trips are felt beyond words. No one connects you to the Pacific Coast like Princess. Princess Cruises. Book now.
Well, hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome back here to RaceSpotTV, and welcome back to the PCA Club Class. This is round number 5 of this season, coming to you tonight from Oulton Park. My name is Ron Mullins. Alongside me in the broadcast booth is Will Chadwick, with Hugo Luis working all the cameras and the graphics in the virtual production hauler. Well, Will, we're looking forward to this round of the championship, but before I ask you about this track, which you said right before we went on the air is pretty much just in your backyard, need to get some business taken care of first, and we have been thrilled as of recent here to have Princess Cruises back as our PCA sim racing title sponsor here for 2026. With 17 ships sailing to 345 destinations on 7 continents, world-class cuisine inspired by the places we visit, and the friendliest crew at sea, Princess is ready to help you welcome yourself on board. And specifically for PCA members, join the Treffins at Sea 2026 Pacific Wine Country Cruise on the Grand Princess, sailing from Vancouver to Los Angeles September 19th to the 25th. Go to the website, link on screen, pca.princesspartnerships.com, or call 833-679-2188 to speak to a PCA travel concierge agent. That is 833-679-2188. Well, Will, we can switch off into the action now and talk about this stunner of a racetrack. I adore Oulton. I think it puts on some really good racing, and it's just a part of a very intriguing schedule that we've had here for Series 15.
Yeah, straight after the mid-season point here in this championship, Oulton Park's a fantastic circuit, very, very local to me, and a super technical one. Really, really punishing if you make any mistakes at all. So drivers tonight will have to be on their toes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, looking through the races that we've had as of recent, Long Beach 2 weeks ago, for crying out loud, the fact that this is going to be somehow even more of a test for these racers really shows you that this track is a super tough nut to crack. Suzuka, Road Atlanta, and Daytona to follow between now and the midpoint of April, when we can crown a champion here in the PCA Club Class. But already looking pretty good for Grand Mikesh. 3 wins in the first 4 rounds of this championship, holds on to a comfortable 130-point margin over Greg Strelzoff in P2. Terrence Song is slotted in 3rd. Mark Foley is directly behind him in 4th. Lyle Eddy is not too far behind in P5. From here, the gaps start to get smaller and smaller. Casey McDonald is slotted in 6th. Jonathan Kuo is slotted in 7th. Mike Matson is class in P8. Ben Leung in 9th, with Dale Green completing your top 10 here in the PCA Club Class standings. Now officially through the first half of what has been an incredible season of racing action. Of course, Long Beach last time out, lots of different quirks and features with that race. We're back to the rolling starts here after having to consider the standing starts at Long Beach 2 weeks ago. But now we've got to look ahead to this qualifying session. 2.5 minutes left here on the clock, and here's how it stands so far. Mark Foley is your current provisional pole sitter, a half a second margin between himself and Jonathan Kuo. That is a huge gap to have between your top 2 qualifiers.
Yes, massive margin, like you say, between number 1 and number 2, but it's super close when you look that just a little bit further back inside the top 10, just a couple tenths splitting 5th to 10th. But I expect some people still to be setting lap times. 1:31 is a pretty quick lap time around here in the 992 GT3R, so pretty good going here this evening. But for Mark Foley, great start to his qualifying session.
Yeah, fantastic start from Mark Foley, looking to grab the pole position here in this race. It would be his first pole since round number 1 at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City. So if he can do that, that would be a very good turn of form to kick off the second half of this PCA Series 15 season up and rolling as best as he could. But talking about the small margins, look at the gap between Ben Leung and Grant Mikash for third and fourth. That is 1,000th of a second, which may not seem like a lot, and that's because it most certainly isn't. Doubly so on a racetrack that is this small and technical, that really that could be an inch farther in, closer to an apex at any of the 17 turns around this track. Following David Snelling coming across the line, he's currently qualified in 34th in the 935 car. That's a time of 133.2. I believe that will not count. I think he may have had a track invalidation at some point during the lap. That's one thing that we do have to consider here in this session, Will. The track limits can be a little bit of a pain in the hind end for these competitors.
Yeah, certainly something that's quite challenging around at Oulton Park, and it's not just running over track limits. In a qualifying session, if you get that little bit too close to the inside tyre walls at both Britain's and Hislop's, our 2 chicanes here tonight, you can get a car contact, which will also invalidate your lap. So it is possible, quite possible, to get a lot of invalid laps here at Oulton Park, despite not doing much wrong.
Yeah, we were joking about before we went live, talking about those tire bundles being made out of the matter of white dwarf stars. If any drivers just so happen to hit those, especially on lap 1, the results could be absolutely catastrophic for not just them, but the rest of the field who may be piling into the incident not too long later. Seeing some drivers also whack the curb on the inside of turn number 2 as they had their way down the hill. Very fun opening series of turns to get this lap up and rolling, but it looks like Mark Foley is going to be the king of Oulton Park here in round number 5 of the season, grabbing his second pole and ending a streak that's been going for quite some time of Greg Strelzoff. He's been able to grab 2 poles thus far this season, but not going to get his third here tonight. Should be noted as well to any of you tuning into this broadcast who may not see some of the usual names that you see here in the series. There's actually a limit of 40 cars able to enter here, and there's usually a little bit more than that here in this series, so some drivers were just timed out. But Will, I'll pass the mic off to you to give a nice little lap guide with Mark Foley's pole lap.
Down towards Old Hall Corner, tip it in, get close to the inside curb. You want to be trying not to run too wide there with the recent 3D curve updates. Down towards Cascades, keeping the car wide on the outside, late apex using the camber of the corner, and through turn towards Island Bend. Island Bend's going to be flat out in a GT3 car. We see it, we get close to the inside, don't want to clip the curb too much, pull it right across for the Shell Oils hairpin. Going to get into the inside camber, power out through the exit as you head your way down onto down to the Britain chicane. You're looking for that left curb, jump it a little bit, jump the right a little bit, and straighten the car out as you crest the hill and go down over hilltop. Cars re-emerge and you're down into the Hislop chicane. You want to get close to these 2 barriers as possible. Apex 1, Apex 2. Going to get your car as far across to the left as you can to go through Knickerbrook as you climb the clay hill and head towards one of the most daring sections on the track, Druids Corner. It's a double apex. You're going to be keeping the car out wide, Apex 1, Apex 2, and you pull the car out as you crest the hill and you've got 1 corner to go, Lodge. Going to get down on the brakes hard onto the inside line, graze that curb as you come over the top of the hill, run the car out beautifully, and to your line, that's almost half a second ahead of the rest of the field.
Yeah, fantastic lap from Mark Foley to grab his second pole position of this season, and to do it at a track as well with no point to really catch your breath as a driver. Outside the Lakeside straightaway and the Hilltop straightaway mirrored from one another, you don't really have any single point to just breathe. Even down in pit lane, it'll be tricky, and we'll have to talk about that a little bit later on here in this broadcast. For now, though, seeing the drivers have a small little point of rest of their own, the warm-up session, and we'll use this as a good opportunity to take a look at your starting grid in a couple of moments' time, let you know how all the drivers are going to shake out for the 5th round of what has been a fantastic season of PCA action through to this point. If you want to never miss out on the racing action that we've got here on RaceSpotTV, how about you click that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss out on any of the racing action, looking at the wonderful sights and sounds of Oulton Park, a track that I also have to say throughout the season, one of the more gorgeous as well, just visually speaking.
Yes, recent art update for Oulton Park here on iRacing, a track that's been on this service, well, for as long as I can personally remember, and I'm sure our producer can as well. Yes, so recently, curb updates to add 3D curbing and also general foliage grass updates. So this track's had a bit of a remodel recently, and it actually has changed how it drives as well. The 3D curbs mean that you can't quite use them how you used to be able to. They're a little bit slippier, a little bit more punishing. So if drivers haven't come to this circuit in a little while, they could have been having to relearn the circuit slightly from some of these subtle changes to the curbing.
Yeah, and I remember at Sebring when they first brought out the 3D curbs a couple of years ago, that kind of wreaked havoc for some. I remember seeing an F4 car strike the moon there, but, well, we will completely just breeze past that. Let's take a look at our starting grid. It's going to be Mark Foley starting from the pole position here in this race. That half a second margin nearly between himself and his fellow front row sitter of Jonathan Quo. A big margin here, so certainly he's a favorite heading into this. Ben Leung is slotted in third. Grant Mikash will join him on row number 2. Row 3 will consist of Joshua Jepson. He'll be alongside Will Wolf at the start of this race. Looking right behind on row number 4, it'll be Kevin Orr alongside Terrence Tong. Rounding out your top 10 will be Jason Barnett next to Peter Sigourney with Tom Bryce and Mario Gonzalez rounding out the 6th row respectively. Right behind them on row number 7 will be Jeremy Hall alongside James Martin. They'll be joined inside the top 16 by Peter Coomer and Lyle Eddy right behind them on row 8. Row 9 meanwhile will be Dean Chapman alongside Dale Green, and then completing your top 20 here in this race will be Robert Neville in that always lovely blue tartan car. He'll be alongside Richard Woodruff, the Arizona region driver, running at your top 20. Brett Holmes will start in 21st next to Lance Grimm in 22nd place. David T. Glenn will be in 23rd next to Greg Strelzoff. After 2 poles this season, that's a very disappointing qualifying run for him. Casey McDonald will start in 25th. Next to him will be Jeremy Main. Mike Madsen will be in 27th next to Chad Caseon in 28th. Scott Bowers will be in 29th. Logan Madden will complete your top 30. And then from there, just a few more drivers left to go through. It's Mark Lacombe alongside Rex Jarawala, Mark Rondeau alongside David Snelling, and then running at your field, it's Ken Locklear, Charlie Farah in P35 and P36, and then just 3 more: Steve Komatz, Chris Sherburne, and Kevin Schultz. Running at your 39 drivers set to grab the green flag in a couple of moments' time here at Oulton Park, seeing the drivers line up right after Clay Hill. Right before that, as you mentioned in the lap guide there, William, the rather daring Druid's Corner. But switching our attention away from the track and talking about these drivers, after being the quickest driver in practice and our pole sitter by some margin, I think Mark Foley is probably got to be hard to beat here tonight.
Yeah, very, very good lap from Mark Foley in qualifying. Like you say, half a second is a really good margin in a field like this. So it's going to be interesting to see how the race unfolds. There's a lot of things that can catch you out here at Oulton Park, so we're going to see whether he can pull away, or maybe that lap that he did in qualifying was just a perfect lap for him. So we could be interesting to see how it sort of pans out as we go racing here tonight.
And speaking of perfect, just about perfect conditions for these drivers. 70 degrees Fahrenheit for the ambient temperature, 72 for the track temp. So that is just about perfect. Maybe a bit on the cool end, but I know back in my karting days, I always preferred when things were a little bit cooler instead of being a bit too hot. I would rather be able to have a nice cup of hot cocoa before I get behind the wheel instead of having to down about a gallon of ice water. But about to get this 5th round of this season up and rolling here at Oulton Park. It's going to be a challenging hour for these competitors. Want to welcome you all into tonight's broadcast, but let's bring the thunder here at Oulton Park as a green flag flies. The drivers are on their way, and we're racing with Mark Foley getting off to a massive jump. He'll lead over Jonathan Quo as Ben Leung and Grant Mikash go side by side. Mikash with championship aspirations trying to jump into the podium spots early. He'll be side by side still as they head their way down the hill into 3. They single file out right behind. I thought Joshua Jepson and Will Wolf were going to start to squabble up, but it looks like they have decided to settle their differences. So too have Leung and Mikash as Mark Foley extends his margin with Jonathan Quo directly behind.
Quo very, very close as we go into the Shell Oils hairpin for the very, very first time. Everybody seems to be remaining pretty calm, and these opening sequences, someone's gone round at Island Bend. I'm not quite sure who that is. I think most avoid it in the background, but yeah, going to be really tricky there to rejoin the circuit. Hopefully not too many cars involved as we go through Britons for the very first time.
Yeah, off through the chicanes. I believe it was Mike Matson, the number 9 car that was around. Oh my goodness me, as that's a huge bump for Jonathan Quo. Overshoots his braking marker big time, and he's going to be stuck off in that island for so long, waiting for that never-ending train of cars to blow him by. And just like that, the challenge that Mark Foley was feeling has now disappeared, as he's still stopped on the side of the road, trying to find a way to rejoin the racetrack without further incident. He does, but he's now way at the back.
Oh, super annoying for Quo there, because he had a really good start. I was really surprised with how eager and close he was to the back of Foley. I was thinking we might have quite an interesting race on here, but now Foley with a 1.5 second margin, Quo just touching the outside grass on his way into his laps, and unfortunately spinning the car around.
Yeah, small little just clip of a lawn clipping heading down in there, and you're going to be in for a world of hurt. Looking at a battle that is now cooled off between Peter Sigourney and Jason Barnett, although they were squabbling up for quite some time. Barnett holding on to 8th over Sigourney in 9th, with Mario Gonzalez in the 777 car completing your top 10 as we head our way in through the island bend for the second time here in this race. Here on lap 2, Mark Foley leads by a 1.5 seconds over Ben Leung, but that challenge certainly got a lot easier after this moment for Jonathan Quo. I think it just overshot his braking marker a little bit, and then the grass was just the final nail in the coffin.
Yeah, I agree with you, actually. I think it was more of an avoidance measure. Like, he overshot his braking. He was like, oh, I'm not sure what to do. Tried to pull the car a little bit to the left to make sure he wasn't making contact with Foley, and unfortunately got on the grass. We've had another car have an issue at the exit of Britain's just before Hilltop, able to get back going. Not quite sure what happened there on the exit.
Yeah, so that's Lyle Eddy trying to get the car spun back around in the right direction. Here's how the car ended up spun around in the wrong direction, though. I was expecting that the curb was going to be involved in that, but it didn't even look like the curb played a factor in Lyle Eddy's spin, just simply gassing it up a little bit too early, heading out of Brins. I said that the conditions were perfect for these cars, Will, and I think that will ring true once the tires get up to temp, but right now in the early stages, they may be a little bit skittish, and I think that kind of proved it right there.
Yeah, around 4 to 5 laps before we'll see the peak of this tyre here today. It's sort of, you get that peak after about 5, 6, 7, 8 laps, and then we'll start to see a little bit of a plateau as the fuel comes out of the car, and the cars will start to pick up pace again as they start to get a little bit lighter before our pit stop here tonight. But yeah, interesting really, still trying to get that temperature into the tyres. It's super tricky with this tyre model on iRacing to build that temperature, and unfortunately catching himself out on the exit of Britain. We're on board with Mike Matson. This might have been that opening incident we saw at Island Bend. He goes a little bit wide, and yeah, as you can see there, I don't even think there's any contact involved. Maybe minor contact, but very lucky to avoid the wall. Let's watch it from the outside. Yes, there is a little bit of contact, and unfortunately tips the number 9 around, and that's going to be a little bit of a recovery drive needed.
Yeah, he's going to be on the back foot massively after that. Maybe a little bit of damage done to that car as well as a result of that. But thankfully, you know, that, as you said, it could have been a heck of a lot worse. Just a small little tap. I believe it was the 555 of Jeremy Main that was on the inside at the time. So Jeremy Main may have a look from race controls. That's Rex Jarawala. I think he may have hit those barriers of doom heading off through the second chicane. That's heading off through the Hislop chicane, and even though it may be a bit more open, bit more of a heave-ho section than the Bryn chicane right before it, it's still a bit of a pain in the hind end. We actually contacted beforehand. It wasn't contact with the barrier, but contact with a car.
Yeah, super tight circuit, Oulton Park. When you're going side by side there, you need the room. And unfortunately, yeah, just getting a little bit close to the outside. Watching the 222 into Lodge, exiting the final corner, just carries that little bit too much speed in. And because you've got so much weight on the front nose of this GT3R, spins the car around as we come round Lodge, and unfortunately having to rejoin at the back of the pack for the 222.
Yes, a tough break for Peter Sigourney. We'll have to see how the rest of the race goes for him. We've seen a lot of drivers be put on the back foot early on here, but one of the drivers that was on the back foot pretty much from the get-go is Greg Strelzoff, and has been able to jump his way up into 21st after starting, I believe, 27th, but still not the recovery that he may have had in mind, and this certainly music to the ears of Grant Mikash, despite running in your final podium spot in 3rd, despite the fact he has 3 wins thus far this season. I think that taste of champagne maybe gotten a little bit too familiar with him, and certainly one driver who's happy about the fact that he's running farther back is Strelzoff. Unfortunately for him, he's running even farther behind outside the top 20, so we'll continue to touch on that storyline when we think about the championship aspirations here in the second half of this season. But still early doors, very early stages of this 5th round of the championship. Not even 7 minutes in, but Mark Foley still putting his stamp on this race already.
Super important for Foley with his championship aspirations in mind. You know, we're not just playing for first here, we're playing for every position you can possibly get. And Foley was 4th going into this round and only 50 points back from Terence Tong. So with that 350 points he'll be getting provisionally from winning this race, I could see him certainly jumping up inside that top 3, which surely must be an aim of his. And yeah, very, very good on British soil here tonight for him so far.
Yeah, so everybody looking at this race really ever since the schedule got revealed, just saying, okay, this is the one where I just need to survive. Then Long Beach to some degree. It's fascinating to see that those 2 races are kind of the midpoint of this season, because I guess that would be the fair point at which some of the strongest tests come from, kind of test you at the very peak of the hill, so come time a little bit later on, the drivers can focus more on the championship instead of just a matter of survival.
I'm not sure if you're seeing this, Rob, but I'm seeing a stormtrooper in the 172's room. I'm not quite sure how he's able to focus while he's under Imperial Order, potentially. So that's incredible. I was not expecting that. Maybe you've seen this before, but that's amazing.
Oh, I've gotten the opportunity to see these driver setups many, many times thus far this season, and I always absolutely love it. I wonder if it's just the pressure there of knowing that you're under that watch, or maybe he's feeling a bit less pressure just because he knows how Stormtrooper aims usually go, and even from point blank distance, I don't think he would get hit.
That's a really good point, actually. And I wonder if it's a phone, a laptop, or maybe even a webcam with an extremely long cable. That's something that's in my mind.
Give it to the American on this broadcast to talk about talk about things from a short-range distance. We'll breeze past that. 51.5 minutes still left to go in this race, and with stormtroopers and chicane shenanigans notwithstanding, here's how things stand at the present moment. It's single file threat most of the top of the field, but farther behind it's getting a little bit froggy. Here's Dean Chapman, contact made as they head their way off into Shell Oils. Great spot to try and get a move done, but if it ends in tears, it's going to end like that.
Ooh, yeah, I don't think that was intentional there. But yeah, like you say, just getting that little bit of contact as they got under the braking zone, the car getting a little bit loose. I think intentionally sort of giving that place back as they were going through the middle of Shell Oils. So a little bit of self-policing there. You're watching the number 87 down towards the Hislop chicane, down the inside, making a lunge down the inside, but not quite able to get the move done. And now he's under attack as we go into Knickerbrook. Looks to be retaining that position, but an interesting dive there for the 087 into the chicane.
Yeah, and Robert Neville, a driver that I've gotten the opportunity to cover for many, many moons, both here in the world of the PCA and in the Radical SR10s, whether it be in officials, which I don't think he's actually popped into any of the officials, but he has certainly raced in some of the other Radical League events that we cover here on RaceSpotTV, and their 2026 season is about to get up and rolling. I believe Robert Neville will be a part of that series as well, but I digress. Very quick racer here in the PCA world, holding on to the final spot inside the top 20, one spot down from where he started in this race, but considering some of the chaos and craziness that went down throughout this field, I think just a matter of being in it to win it. Of all the races to bring up the saying to finish first, you have to finish, this is probably the one to bring it up here in Series 15.
This or Long Beach is certainly a really good case to say that. Interesting to look at the front. You know, the gap's not really extending right now for Foley. He seems to be controlling that around about 2 seconds. And I'm already starting to think a little bit about the pit stop phase here. You know, you've got the pit entry here at Oulton Park. It's pretty challenging, a little bit like we had last round at Long Beach as well. But challenging pit entry, people are going to have to be thinking a little bit about their strategy. If you're stuck at the back of one of these trains and you think you have a lot of pace, but you're not quite able to make that move, you might be starting to think a little bit about your fuel strategy and what you could do to maybe get a little bit of a jump. Two fantastic POV cameras from the world of PCA here tonight.
Yeah, and you know who I feel bad for in all this? Well, I feel bad for Hugo's graphics card, because that thing has got to be screaming. That is... Ooh, a lot of stuff going on here, but some very nice stuff. See, I'm always a fan of the Robert Neville sort of blue tartan pattern scheme, which I'm definitely biased there, as that's a driver spinning off the track, heading out of the second to last turn. That's out of Lodge Corner, and that's Lance Grimm from the Sacramento Valley. He spun off the circuit and cleared damage on the front end of that race car. He impacted those tires.
Yeah, that's not going to be great for him. Maybe needing to get that repaired, but a big time loss. We're seeing that happen quite a lot here this evening. As you go through Lodge, you kind of go and drop down the hill before you get over Deer Leap, so you get that sort of weight transfer to where the car goes loose as you crest the hill, and it just catches the 002 out. And yeah, unfortunate for Grimm there, able to get back going pretty quickly, but front damage, like you say, to the front of that 992 GT3R.
Yeah, and usually in a situation like that, I would consider what kind of suspension damage may have been done to that car, but I think here you got to worry about the aerodynamic damage as well. Many turns where if that front end isn't working with you, you're going to be done for. So we'll have to keep an eye on how Grimm's pace continues on, whether it's going to be a bit of a sunshine scenario, considering the unfortunate moment that just happened, or whether the scenario for him is going to be a bit more grim as we go through the rest of the stint. That was a softball. I had to swing at that. Looking at the battle, starting to get intense out there on the circuit, though. We run on board with Will Wolf. He's holding on to P5 at the moment, has Josh Jepson and Grant Mikesh right in view of him, but as these three drivers are starting to merge back into one little train, the front two, as you raised a few moments ago, William, talking about how the gap wasn't really growing, it was just kind of plateauing, it's starting to go down. That 2-second margin that Mark Foley had over Ben Leung has now dipped down by 8/10.
Yeah, top 5 cars in this race, very, very close together, just 3 seconds separating the top 5, and Wolf all over the back of Jefferson right now, and he seems to have quite a lot of pace, and like I was saying, although we're quite early in the race, it's a super hard track to pass, and unless the car ahead of you is making a mistake and you're within striking distance, you might be having to start thinking about what you can do in that pit stop phase. So it could be really, really critical as we get towards that phase of the race, as I think Grant Mikesh is looking very, very close to Leung out to the British chicane.
Yeah, see, I was going to raise kind of like, okay, what's going to happen here first in this battle? Is Ben Leung going to be able to close up that gap fully between himself and Mark Foley, or is that train of Mikesh, Jepson, and Will Wolf going to close in on them first? Clearly, it's a bit more of the former instead of the latter, as this 4-car battle is looking to intensify out there on the circuit. Lots of pressure in this fight. You know, Ben Leung holding on to P2, this would be a fantastic result for the driver of the 290 car. Brent Mikesh still at those championship aspirations, 3 wins already in his back pocket in the first 4 races, so not feeling too much pressure to try and perform at the top of his game. He just wants to try and get some good results and keep it at the barrier, but he still wants to run well. You know, you can't rest on your laurels a little bit too much here in this series, because, you know, next thing you know, the results start slipping, and then eventually you find yourself in that season finale in a couple of weeks' time in a much worse position championship-wise. A championship points gap, as I always say, is kind of like a reserve parachute whenever you go skydiving. It's good to have, but in an ideal world, you would never want to use it.
Yes, that's really good point, and down towards Shell Oils. Ooh. Whoa, I thought we were going to have a bit of contact there between Wolf and Jefferson. Thankfully, they've all come out the other side with no contact there, but yeah, super, super close onto the apex of the Shell Oil Turbine there. A little bit of a back up from, I think, a poor exit from Mikesh exiting the Cascades corner, turn number 3 here officially on the track map. So you can see how this whole front pack is almost acting a little bit like a train. So, you know, one movement, one mistake from one driver tends to back everything else up, and we're seeing a few knock-on effects from that sort of action.
See, I'm hoping that we don't get too much training going on right now. Otherwise, I'm going to break out the harmonica and then I'll blow everybody's eardrums out. Looking at Terrence Tong, who's trying to hop aboard the train to try and bring himself farther up the road. He was nearly caught up in the crossfire with that moment off into Shell Oils. We've seen so many kind of sketchy moments heading off in there, and that's not a matter of these drivers trying to bring the thunder. That's just kind of the nature of that turn. It's got a lot of banking to help you out, and whenever you see a little bit of banking, and with how wide that turn is too, I'd say the banking is kind of similar to what you find at the carousel at the Nordschleife, the Nürburgring. It's very inviting to try and get a move done through there, but the banking is a bit of a double-edged sword. It's inviting, but it's also kind of like a catfish, because if you find yourself going into there with a bit too much speed, that small little 5 feet of hope gravel trap on the outside is going to get skipped over, and you're probably going to lawn dart yourself into the tire bundle lickety-split.
Yeah, back in the early 2010s, they repaved that corner for the first time in a number of years, actually increasing the banking a little bit in real life. It's an interesting point you mentioned, because as you get onto the entry, the inside front wheel unloads even more than it normally would, and you tend to get more ABS activation. And like we've seen at some corners where we've seen the drivers go in maybe a little bit too fast and get on the nose and spin it round, it actually increases your chance of having that happen at Shell Oils. So it's a tricky corner for the drivers to kind of get used to, and you have to recalibrate your brain a little bit, because everything changes when you've got a bit of banking in a corner like that, and it's super important for these drivers to master that, to not only make passing opportunities happen, but also make sure that they're lapping at the best speed they possibly can.
And a fantastic point that you bring up, talking about the banking. It is so tricky to try and manage. You may think, oh yeah, you could just go through it like a quicker hairpin, but no, there's so much nuance to it. It creates, it's a nice little cake that these drivers have one sitting and one fork to try and dive their way into to figure out how that cake was made. Very tricky to try and get into the mind of a baker in a quick little period of time. But as we are moving forward throughout this race and bringing the thunder with some good battling farther behind your race leader of Mark Foley, who's been able to stretch out the gap once more here in this race. We would once again like to thank Princess Cruises for continuing on as our PCA sim racing title sponsor here for 2026. With 17 ships sailing to 345 destinations on 7 continents, world-class cuisine inspired by the places we visit, and the friendliest crew at sea, Princess is ready to welcome you on board. And specifically for PCA members, join the Treffin at Sea 2026 Pacific Wine Country Cruise on the Grand Princess, sailing from Vancouver to Los Angeles, September 19th to the 25th. Go to the website link on the screen right now, pca.princesspartnerships.com, or call 833-679-2188 to speak to a PCA travel concierge agent. That is 833-679-2188. You know, if you went up to me right as I got into this broadcasting stuff, which as of only 2 days ago was 3 years ago, if you went up to me back in high school when I did my first ever broadcast and tried to tell him what the word concierge meant, he would probably respond by saying that the last big word he learned like that was mayonnaise. That's a moment for Robert Neville on the 087 car. He went off the circuit heading off what was my favorite turn on this racetrack solely for the name, Knickerbrook.
Yeah, fantastic corner, and can be an extremely intimidating one depending on what layout of Oulton Park you're running. We're running the traditional full layout here today, the island layout, and it's less of a corner. We're going to look at that incident for the 087 as you come through, catching the grass on the outside, trying to open it up that little bit more. That was second in the championship. Greg Strelzoff just behind him. Thankfully, not any damage for him, but yeah, a little bit of trouble rejoining there. The grass is super, super slippery.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was a major Code Brown moment for Strelzoff right in tow. He basically had to bring that car almost to a complete standstill to try and avoid making contact. He's had a rough go of things over the past couple of races, has shown some incredible speed, was able to grab the pole at Long Beach, but had a jump start there. Also ran into some trouble early on in the race at Sebring. In fact, 2 races in a row now where he suffered from start violations. Hasn't happened here. He's looking to get the momentum swinging in his direction and swinging in his favor once more. That's the, I wouldn't say odd thing, but a unique characteristic about the PCA series. The fact that there is a 1 week break between every single round. The fact there's only 8 rounds to a season. The momentum, the mental momentum is always going to be something that you have to consider, because if you can't stay with it from race to race, it's going to slowly but surely eat you alive in one of these 1 hour events.
Yeah, and do you know what that's quite important across an 8-round season? You can think it's quite short, but if you start off the season, putting a load of effort into practice, really pushing yourself to make as much of your available time to be as fast as physically possible, but by the mid-season you're not able to keep yourself motivated, or you're not quite able to do as many practice sessions, you can really struggle with like a tail off or a lack of motivation, as we see a Dale Green go down the inside of Peter Kuma coming into the island bend. So that's a good move for him into 13th position. But like I say, it's really important to be able to keep consistent across 8 rounds, consistent amount of practice, and be as motivated as you possibly can be for the whole 8 championship rounds.
Yeah, that's the big word, motivation. You gotta be motivated to always push yourself, but pace yourself as well. Another good M word that we can bring up here is the word marathon, because it is a marathon in these races, a marathon in this season. You have 8 hours actually, pardon me, of racing action between the start of the campaign at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez all the way through to the end of our season finale here in Series 15 at Daytona in April. So there's a lot that these racers have to consider. You gotta pace yourself well. You just can't put in all the energy at the start, but if you do put in the energy, you gotta keep it rolling. You just can't let yourself kind of get complacent. That's something that can bite you really hard in a series like this. I want to jump up to the front if it's at all possible, though. Mark Foley and Ben Leung, they're close. 0.8 of a second is the margin. Now, I would say here, William, probably for the first time since about turn 15 on the first lap, there's less than a second margin between our top 2.
Yeah, that's the first time we've seen them as close as they have been since, sort of like you say, lap number 1 also saw a little bit of lap traffic, probably about 10-15 seconds ahead, so that could come into play sooner rather than later. Through Britons, you can see a lot of commitment from Ben Leung on the way in, losing a little bit on the exit, but overall gaining before we head down into his laps. Ooh, a little bit deep there on the brakes for Leung. He's pushing super hard on these entries to try and put a little bit of pressure on Mark Foley. That top 5 gap as a whole has come down within the last sort of laps. Everyone in that sort of range gaining on the leader by about a second. Perhaps some tyre wear getting into play, and maybe Foley is just managing the pace. But it's going to be interesting to see as we head round Lodge Corner to see what's really happening here, because as we finish lap number 15, it's a bit of an interesting dynamic. We're getting closer to that pit stop phase, and can Leung maybe make something happen by pitting a lap earlier or pitting a lap later to try and make an over or undercut happen?
Yeah, and when we get lost up in the strategy discussion, we're going to see so many racers do some odd things. We've seen some peculiar strategy calls made throughout this season, in contrast to Series 14 when we were running the Porsche Cup cars, the now legacy content, original version of the Porsche Cup cars here on iRacing. It was a bit more known what you could do strategically. It's like, okay, here was the pit stops. The pit window was rather small. Here in this season, though, throughout all of the rounds, it's been a bit more open to drivers' interpretation of what they can do in these Porsche 992 GT3 machines. Even in the first round of the championship, it wasn't here in the club class, it was in the PCA Challenge class when the husband and wife duo of Ken and Lisa Eskridge were able to run all the way through from the start of that race through to the finish without even coming down pit lane. Now, that had been the first time that I'd seen that in my entire time covering PCA action here on RaceSpot. I thought they were going to get a penalty. Turns out they don't. The pit stops are more or less a requirement to make it to the end instead of a requirement by the rules. You just can't usually pull off a strategy like that, but at Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez in Mexico City. They were able to pull it off. Here, though, this track is a lot more stop-starty, less opportunities to do some fuel saving, so I don't think that is a realistic option for these racers. But in a train like that, William, if you have the opportunity to just stay tucked in behind your rival, you could probably extend that fuel mileage out by quite some distance.
Oh, for sure. You know, I think what people underestimate and underappreciate in racing is that, you know, you're not looking for that massive amount of fuel saving every lap to make a difference. If you're saving 0.005 of a litre a lap, it can make a really big difference. So even tiny margins of fuel that you can save every lap just by cleaning up your pedal crossover, just by not blending the throttle as much, and just saving that little bit of fuel every single lap adds up to maybe a 1 or 2 litre saving across a race, and that can be the difference. That can really be the difference when we come into pit stops, because like we can see, you know, this top 8 even are all within striking distance of each other. And if one person gets that perfect pit stop and a little bit of clean air as they re-enter the racetrack, they might just have a chance to jump a whole number of cars.
I'm sure the gears are turning in these drivers' heads, trying to think of what they can do to try and maximize their run here in the race. They're looking to get the second half of this season up and rolling in the best way imaginable. Start off this final part of the journey with your best foot forward. So you got Foley trying to do that, extending his lead once more. Grant Mikesh looking to continue on his charge as he looks to do exactly here in this season what Ryan Cowley did in Series 14, and that is win this season. And he was pretty all right last season, I can tell you that with confidence. Seeing some drivers coming out pit lane, though, that's complicating the equation quite a lot. Talking about the lap traffic dilemma here, William, how hard do you think it is for these racers to get past the traffic here?
Well, it's an interesting dilemma because, you know, the 135 has his race too. He might have just made his pit stop. That certainly looks to be like what has happened. So he's got to get back on it. He's got to get back on the pace, and he can't be losing too much time here to the top 10. But he also knows if he's fighting them, if he's losing time by going side by side, it can really cost him. But just by coming out at that sort of inopportune time with that, you know, 2nd to 8th pack, he's had to, you know, give up a number of seconds in order not to block them. So now he can get his head down. We're looking side by side. Wolf, I think Jefferson actually, down the inside of Wolf as we head into the Hislop chicane and through Knickerbrook. Jefferson making his moves before the start of the pit stop, looking to close down that 1.2 second gap ahead of him to Grant Mikesh.
Yes, a good move from Joshua Jefferson to try and jump his way up into P4. Got the move done. Now Will Wolf is the meat of the sandwich between Joshua Jefferson and Terrence Tong, who's still right there to try and pass. You can't discredit the likes of Kevin Orr, though. About 0.8 of a second behind, 0.3 of a second back from him is Jason Barnett. And then you have to go well farther back to find Mario Gonzalez. About 4 seconds in tow, holding on to 9th at the current moment. So some good train action going on here out on the racetrack with Mark Foley looking to become the first driver here in Series 15 of the PCA Club class to convert a pole into a win. He says right as he remembers that Greg Strelzoff was able to do that at Phillip Island.
But it's okay. But one thing to mention, I was just thinking Jefferson, I didn't see him side of the top 10 in our club standings, but he's not even got more than 100 points this season. 0 points race number 1, 0 points race number 2, 90 points, I believe, last time out at Long Beach. This is a huge result for him right now. The Florida driver having an opportunity to score 250 plus points as you're looking at your battle for second, side by side into the braking zone. Looks to be Ben Leung able to keep on to that for now. If you notice, between Leung and Mikesh, they both have very different driving styles. Leung seems super late on the brakes, takes loads of entry speed, and Mikesh tends to sit back a little bit, carry that more general corner speed, and just get a little bit better exits. But Leung super late on the brakes and manages to, I think, just outbrake his rival there into the Hislop chicane, keeping him ahead for the time being.
I think it's fair to say that the Porsche 911, the 992 GT3 here in iRacing is probably one of the more like plug-and-play GT3 cars in iRacing, in the sense that it's a bit more friendly to all different manner of drivers, where they have a bit more of an aggressive style, a bit more of a tamer kind of able to manage a race more easily kind of style of driving. There's a lot of different ways that a racer can tackle these cars and still be able to get some really good pace out of it. I think it is kind of the popular pick in an odd sense, because it's not one that will bite your head off if you can't drive in a certain way. It's relaxed in the sense that it's like, yeah, just go with the flow, be able to do whatever you want.
Yeah, it's got a unique sort of driving characteristic, that rear-engined car. It's an interesting thing. The engine being positioned behind the rear wheels does make it sort of a unique car in the class, and like you say, it's certainly at a lower speed pretty unreactive on the front end, and can be quite open to a lot of driving styles. But, you know, when we come into something like Druid's Corner here, the car can have a very positive front balance, so it can catch you out a few times if you're not quite on top of things. Wolf looks to have closed that gap back down to Jefferson, and yeah, really, really close here between Mikesh, Jefferson and Wolf, just half a second separating the three.
Yeah, so super tight and close margins as we get closer to those pit stops. Now officially into the second half of this fifth round of the championship. Lots to still play for here. Will Wolf looking to get a good result. Joshua Jepson, as you mentioned a few moments ago, will looking to keep some momentum rolling and get a really good second half of the season going for the driver of the number 73 car. Grant Mikesh, I'll cut this differently from what I said a few moments ago, looking to become the second driver here in Series 15 of the PCA Club class to win after starting the race from the pole, and the first since Greg Strelzoff in round number 2 at Phillip Island. He's still got to worry about Ben Leung, and all of them have to worry about Mark Foley, who's now leading 3 seconds over Leung. I mentioned this right before we got the pace lap up and rolling. I think I want to elaborate it on this point just a little bit more. Talking about Mark Foley and the pace that he has shown thus far here, was able to grab that pole by a comfortable margin, and was the quickest driver in practice by a pretty healthy gap too, although smaller smaller than it was in qualifying for sure, but it was still a gap that he had between himself and Ben Leung.
Yeah, and I think that something we're seeing here is, for Foley, it's super important not to make a big mistake, and this track is punishing. You know, when you push it to the limit, when you really go for it, it's super easy, as we've seen in multiple occasions already today, to make that mistake and to have a spin, to go wide, to get into the grass. So maybe it's a case of pace management for him, because he knows if he's giving it his everything, he might be risking putting the car wide. But it's really a balancing act that he needs to kind of perfect here. And this gap, as it is right now, this 3 second margin, is pretty safe in terms of when you think about undercuts or overcuts, let's say. So he wants to be keeping a little bit like this, as we're seeing one of the first cars into the pit lane trying to get to his front pit stall. It's super, super tricky to actually make it there. You're seeing, I think, Strelzoff coming as well for an early stop, hoping to get a bit of an undercut on some of the cars ahead of him.
Yeah, so Strelzoff throwing something different at the wall, seeing what can stick. These are probably the earliest on-schedule pit stops that we have had thus far this season, continuing on the theme of pit stops and pit strategies being wildly different from one round of the championship through to another. But with the pit stops going on, we jump once again to the action out there on the racetrack, looking at a two-car fight that we have on screen right now that looks to be more or less settled, although it definitely did get a little bit tense as they headed their way off into Shell Oil's turn number 5. It's the 934 car of Richard Woodruff from Arizona, holding on to P15 at the present moment, as David T. Glenn directly in tow. We now brought on board with Glenn, getting a good view as to what the deal is in this two-car fight right now, as have seen a swap-roo farther up the road. Things get a bit tense here. Kevin Orr getting passed by Jason Barnett, and Will Wolfgang overtaken by Terrence Sung. Is Kevin Orr actually going to peel off and become one of the first drivers inside the top 10 to make a pit stop?
Going to be interesting to watch here for Kevin Orr. He's definitely going to try and get that undercut on some of the guys ahead of him. Important for Tong, third in the championship, needs to minimize points loss to the likes of Foley, who's leading at the front of the field. So it's important for him to get himself into the top 5. You're looking at this pass action. You're seeing Wolf just getting loose there. A brilliant save on the exit of Druids, but it leaves him vulnerable to the cars behind. He's able to defend as we see Orr getting past, and he's thinking, I don't want any of this. I'm losing too much time. I've got to get into the pit lane. So Orr to the pit lane for the first time this evening, and he's going to be one to watch as we get to some of the strategic ends of this battle.
You know, one point I do want to ask you here, Will, kind of talking about this racetrack and these cars and the way these drivers have had to manage it, despite the fact that these, you know, are very, very fast, fine-tuned modern racing machines, 465 horsepower, boatload of grip, have a lot of aerodynamics to help you out here. I feel like just keeping the momentum rolling through the turns has been a massive factor throughout this race. See a driver with a small little wiggle and they lose out on some time through an apex, and they're just going to be chopped liver coming out of it.
Yeah, I think it's often underestimated how much it matters to really carry as much speed as possible. Looking at Jefferson maybe vulnerable into Old Hall Corner as he got a little bit wide, taking that outside line. Mikesh was sort of making a few mistakes, which was pushing Jefferson back into Terence Tong. They're going to go side by side. It looks to have been decided between the two of them, and Wolf strikes back after his slide at Druids, and he's able to get back through into that top 5, maybe now attacking Jefferson into Island Bend.
Oh, and they are nearly 2x2 as they headed their way off into Island Bend. That would have been some gutsy stuff. Oh, hold on to it. Contact made. That's Will Wolf with a huge sideways wiggle as he tried to get the move done on Jefferson. And then you can see Terrence Tong and Jason Barnett getting involved in that, chewing up and spitting out Will Wolf there as he barely held on to that number 16 machine. I don't even think he knows how he held on to that. He should probably buy a lottery ticket after he gets out of the cockpit, because he will probably win the millionaire jackpot based off the fact he kept that car out of the barrier.
Rod, how have we seen not a huge crash there? I have no idea. People were so close to having a monumental shunt and some amazing driving, to be honest, from a pair of drivers there in a very tricky situation. Wolf, second huge moment for, you know, the second time in just a handful of laps, and somehow able to hang on to the car despite a half spin, you could almost call it, at over 140 mile an hour, and a bit of door banging to go alongside it as well.
You know, these may be far from it, but that was kind of like some touring car action that we were seeing there. Drivers just being the fenders off of their racing machines to try and get the best result they could. Will Wolf just trying to get the best result out of that moment, and his best result was keeping it out of the barriers. Tom Bryce has now come down pit lane in the 968 machine, now in his pit stall right about now. So this race is already giving the vibes of one where everybody's completely split on when exactly you should come down pit lane, which is somewhat understandable considering GT3 racing on a track this small isn't something that you see too much. Will, I know you've raced in some of the Radical SR10 official races that we cover here on RaceSpotTV every single Friday. It was at Thruxton, I believe, a couple of seasons ago when you were able to grab the W in our broadcasted splits. But those SR10s are basically the biggest car that I've ever seen racing here. Usually it's just, you know, lower level machines, Mazda MX-5s, Formula Vs, Spec Racer Fords, the lot. A GT3, on the other hand, it does feel like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, but it's still giving us some good action.
Yeah, it's always a tricky circuit when it comes to overtaking in any class that runs here at Oulton Park. Oulton Park, one of the circuits at the UK that only has limited racing days on Sundays. So it's one of these circuits in the UK which has to be quite careful about the series that it picks. And we do get GT3 racing here at Oulton Park in the real world with the British GT Championship, but it's always a really interesting round because it's super hard to make any sort of moves. Going back to the race at hand, I was starting to think, do you know who all of this fighting's benefiting? Kevin Orr. He's got 10 seconds of real estate in front of him, which is completely clear track. You can see him just in the left timing tower. He's 15th on the road, but he's got like 15 seconds ahead of him. So it's just him versus the stopwatch. Given that his pit stop was as quick as anybody else's is going to be here tonight. He could be really a favourite to get inside that top 5 after all these pit stops have shaken out.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point that you bring up there, Will. I think that Kevin Orr, this is probably the perfect example of a driver, parachuting out of a plane right before the engine blows up. This has worked out very good for him. He's running all by his lonesome, so he has the opportunity to stretch his legs out, not worry about all the chaos and craziness going on around him. What we've got at the moment, comparing Kevin Orr to the drivers that he was going side by side and battling with a matter of a few moments ago, we've pretty much got a guy sitting in a cafe, sipping on a cappuccino and reading a nice book while there's a knife fight going on in the parking lot.
That sounds very true, but it's important to take into account here that it's likely that he's not taken tyres, and he has taken on fuel. Mark Foley into the pit lane alongside the top 3 all into the pit lane for the first time here this evening. We're having a pit party here at Oulton Park. This is going to be the time to tell. One thing I was just going to bring up there as we're watching the cars get their fuel service is these cars have been on a lot lower fuel loads, so theoretically are faster than Kevin Orr's car. But like I said, it was interesting to see whether he could have that bit of clean air and whether that was to help him. We're seeing cars pull away, some fuel strategy. That's not a big lead for your leader of Foley. He looks like he's taken on a decent amount more fuel than some of the cars behind it.
Yeah, so that was very interesting to see there. I also saw just there in the back a shot, Dale Green having a bizarre run through into pit lane. So you can see these racers starting to tussle. Kevin Orr has now stuck his nose right in between Joshua Jepson and Jason Barnett. So this is a battle at the moment for P9, although we still have the pit stops to come here. So things will most certainly get shaken up. But Dale Green had a very bizarre run down in the pit lane, slammed it in reverse, and still trying to figure out exactly how everything worked out there. There's a lot going on in that pit cycle, I will tell you that with confidence. He's still down the pit lane at the moment, marked off as your current race leader. So some odd pit lanery chicanery going on here at the moment as Terrence Tong is now being scored as your race leader. Will Wolf holding on to P2, Peter Cromer, Richard Woodruff running at your top 4 of all drivers who have yet to come down pit lane thus far. So they'll have to come down pit lane soon. And speaking of, Terrence Tong and Will Wolf all going to come down pit lane in the exact same moment. So we're going to get a good idea as to how things are going to shake out with that front battle. As you said at the time, Will, the gap between Foley and Leung really not that large, considering it was 3 seconds when he came into the pits.
Yeah, it was about 2 seconds longer in the pit stop, so potentially going a little bit safe on fuel. Kevin Orr coming out pretty much exactly where we expected him to be, fighting for that top 5 provisional place in the race. It's going to be interesting to see where some of our other drivers are coming out, the likes of Wolf and I think it was Tong that was pitting that lap. So let's see where everyone's shaking out. It looks to be like they've managed to gain a little bit of time, I think, and unfortunately for Jefferson, dropping from 4th to 6th after that pit cycle.
Yeah, so with all the pit stops dealt with, I went back in my own feed to see what the deal was there with Dale Green. He was one of the poor unwilling recipients of the first pit stall here, which is pretty much impossible to get without getting T-boned by a driver directly behind you, which he did have a driver right behind him. So he had to go down like a fifth of the way down pit lane, slam it in reverse, and I think he nearly ended up snapping off his front right tire, hitting the brick wall that he was right next part to. So some odd things going on. It's at times like this when you do realize that this track, fantastic. I personally adore it. I always love racing around here in F3 machinery. That's my personal favorite combination. But you can tell that this track not really designed for 40 Porsche 911 GT3 machines.
Certainly a tight pit lane, and quite unlucky for Green coming into the pit lane. It's something that, if you're not aware of it beforehand, it's super tricky to deal with, and it's one of those things, you see your guy just stood like right at the entry, and you have to make that decision really quickly to brake and pull across, and like you say, you could also have cars behind you which are limiting you from doing that. But yeah, super interesting to look at the race that we've got on here. Terrence Tong able to make up some ground with that sort of overcut that we were seeing from him pitting that 1 lap later than the majority of your top 8. And that's helping him out here, that because he needs to minimize points loss to Mark Foley. I think as it stands, they're certainly pretty close on points if the race was to finish right now.
Yeah, so everybody considering all the different championship permutations as we push forward with the second half of this Series 15 here in the Porsche Club of America. With 15 minutes left on the clock, we would once again thank Princess Cruises, who's continued to be our PCA Sim Racing title sponsor for 2026. With 17 ships sailing to 345 destinations on 7 continents, world-class cuisine inspired by the places we visit, and the friendliest crew at sea, Princess is ready to welcome you on board. And specifically for PCA members, join the Tefron at Sea 2026 Pacific Wine Country Cruise on the Grand Princess, sailing from Vancouver to Los Angeles, September 19th through to the 25th. Go to the website link on screen right now, pca.princesspartnerships.com, or call 833-679-2188 to speak to a PCA Travel Concierge agent. That is 833-679-2188. We would like to once again thank PCA for being, I would like to thank once again Princess Cruises for being the PCA title sponsor. I nearly had those two reversed there. I had to rewire my brain a little bit, get my tongue unwrapped around my teeth when it wrapped around itself 16 times. Let's get back into the action though, following Casey McDonald, currently trying to battle just outside of the top 15 at the current moment. With these racers a little bit farther behind, they're still going to bring their thunder in their respective battles. Casey McDonald up 9 spots from where he started in this race and looking for a couple more.
Yeah, good effort, like you say, from McDonald. One of our drivers that's, maybe struggling a little bit here at this Oulton Park circuit, because sitting 6th in the points coming into this round, struggling a little bit for pace here at Oulton Park, but like you say, it's still, they've still got three rounds left in the season, so it's important to, make those positions up and score the points that you can score coming into these final 3 rounds after this, and trying to still position yourself well in the championship. Between Terence Tong and Mark Foley right now, for that top 3 position in your championship, it's separated by just 10 points. If my live points maths is correct. They do say never trust a commentator's math, but my math has Foley ahead as things stand for the time being. But if Tong is able to maybe get himself into that top 3 here this evening, if he's able to just close down onto Mikesh, who we've seen be pretty fast in this race, but also make a few mistakes, he would be able to defend that 3rd place going into the 6th event of the season. Some contact in the final corner at Lodge. Looks to be some contact to Jeremy Hall, spun around, able to get back going, but unfortunately, a bit of a half spin there, and I'd say 10 plus seconds lost.
Yeah, and let's take a look at it. Heading down into the second to last turn, and contact made there on the inside. Jeremy Hall stuck on the outside, gets spun around off into the gravel trap. Really nothing that he could do in that situation. I believe that was David T. Glenn on the inside of him at the point of contact. Wonder if Race Control may have a look at that. Just looked like close quarters action, but of course Race Control going to be taking a look at all the incidents out there on the racetrack, checking the naughty list, checking it twice, making sure who's naughty or nice. But right now we've got Will Wolf holding on to P5 at the moment, trying to rattle the cage of Terence Tong as these drivers in this 5-car train are starting to lose touch of your podium runners. So I think now with about 11 and a half minutes left on the clock, they've hit the point of the race where their give-a-dams are starting to break, and now they're going to just start battling with each other. I think the prospect of a podium finish is starting to slip out of their hands.
Potentially the case, but it's important to keep your track position. It's a hard track to pass, and like you say, just a bit of pressure from Wolf right now onto Tong. He's been pretty fast this evening, but has been liable to a couple mistakes, as we've seen through some of the high-speed sections, but certainly pretty close to the back of Terence Tong as we head down into Cascade. Tong taking that slightly defensive line. It's going to compromise his exit if Wolf is able to get a good one down towards Island Bend, tucking into that slipstream. I don't think he's quite close enough, but going to take a wider line on entry. He might have a look here into the Shell Oil Zerpin, dives to the inside, isn't able to get onto the brakes late enough to pass Terence Tong, but battle that's developing here in these latter stages. You know, 4th all the way to 8th, super close on the racetrack, as we also see Mikash and Leung close just that little bit further ahead.
Yeah, so as much as I said that these drivers in that 5-car train were maybe losing sight of the opportunity to battle for the podium, which you can never rule out, only 1.2 seconds is the margin. 1.4 seconds is the current margin between Mark Foley and Ben Leung, holding on to second at the moment here in this race. He's got Grant Mikash right behind him, all over him like the plastic on Grandma's couch. That'll be a nice little battle to keep our eyes on. Leung has been able to hold on to P2 throughout this race. Now, we've talked about Mark Foley and the pace that he has shown in the top spot, but Ben Leung deserves some love as well. Was second quickest in practice, only behind Mark Foley, and was your 3rd place qualifier, only behind Jonathan Kuo, who, as a side note, is completely out of this race. He decided to call it a night a little bit earlier on. Gotta wonder how that battle up at the front would have developed if he stayed in this race. But Ben Leung has been very quick here at Oulton, and is certainly looking to try and flex those muscles, as he's got a really tough task of trying to withstand the pressure from Grant Mikash, but it looks like that task will become a heck of a lot easier. Mikash slowing at the moment. He took too much of the inside curb as they headed their way off through turns number 2, and I think he may have picked up a very brief slowdown there. Certainly looked like he lost out a boatload of time regardless.
I think we saw that a little bit earlier in the race. I believe it's probably down to a bit of oversteer late in the corner and just getting a really poor exit. I'm not sure if he got a slow down, but I will stand to be corrected. But yeah, like I say, Mikash has been fast tonight, but crucially has made a few little mistakes when things have started to matter a little bit. And like I say, Tong now has that chance to maybe put some pressure onto Mikash. He's going to be looking to focus up and try and close down that gap once again to Ben Leung ahead in 2nd place.
Yeah, so still some time for the battling up at the front to get intense, but it looks like Grant Mikash, those small little mistakes beginning to pile up. It's not even a matter of life or death, because you have to consider the championship permutations right now. His main championship rival of Greg Strelsoff is holding on to P15. Good recovery drive from him, but not going to be enough to really get Grant Mikash too nervous here. But Mikash is still struggling out there. This is kind of a death by 1,000 cuts situation for Mikash. We haven't seen any major mistakes that have cost him a boatload of time. Just small little mistakes just like that as he runs wide hang out of turn number 3 onto the straightaway. It's small little moments like that that leave him susceptible to the likes of Terrence Tong and Will Wolf right in tow. Thought that Tong was maybe going to go for a move, heading off into the island bend, but we nearly see Barnett go for a move on Kevin Orr right behind him.
That was super close going into the Shell Oils hairpin. I think that one of the things that I'm noticing is it feels like Mikash is really fast everywhere on track, but when we come to Druids, but also Cascades, maybe struggles a little bit with that corner. I don't know if it's maybe not suiting his driving style, but that's 2 laps in a row now. We've seen minor and sort of nearly major mistakes from Mikash going through turn number 3 here at Oulton Park, and that's going to be music to the ears, or eyes, I suppose you could say, of Tong, who is unfortunately under quite a lot of pressure from Will Wolf to the outside of Druids. Maybe Jefferson's now going to have a chance heading into Lodge. They're very close here, with only 6 minutes to go.
Ooh, and this is a gutsy spot to try and go for a move. It can end in tears just as easily as it can end in a successful dive. Lodge corner, turn number 16. Thought that Mikash was going to try, thought that Wolf was going to try and get the move there on Tong. I apologize, but not able to stick it down there. Now Will Wolf taking a good run, heading out of turn number 1 through into 2, into 3 of Cascades, and that's not going to be enough. Once more, Will Wolf now going to feel the pressure from Joshua Jepson right in tow, as Jepson himself feels the pressure from Orr and Barnett right behind. I can feel the tension starting to raise here. It's palpable. You can cut it with a knife. It is starting to boil over here as drivers going for some more gutsy moves. That's Barnett looking for the move around the outside of Kevin Orr. That's off through turn number 5, and what a way to hang it on the edge of control for Barnett. P7 for him.
Wow, what a move from Barnett all the way around the outside, cars getting caught up, braking pretty early on the inside, going into Shell Oils, and Barnett said, you know, that banking sounds good to me. I'm going to take a lot of it. And went right round the outside, getting that move done, and a superb move for the number 495. We're going to get a replay of that super late on the brakes, holding it round the outside, able to get a good enough exit, just carries that speed super on the limit. When we're looking at that curbing on the outside, that was so close.
Yeah, and coming out of the turn all over the curb, hanging his hind end down, that was some gutsy stuff, and he was able to make it work, so props were props, and most certainly due to Jason Barnett, probably the move of the race for him. That was absolutely awesome, but we still have some battling left with the final 4 minutes and 45 seconds here in this race. This is Will Wolf, who we ride on board with. Now, we've seen him get a little bit more adventurous with Terrence Song. He's been thinking about getting the moves in some other sections. He looks for it down the inside into turn number 3 as Terrence Song tries to cover the inside line. A move into turn number 3 can be done, but you need a heck of a lot of conviction to try and get the move done there.
Yeah, and if it's defended, you've pretty much got no chance. And we have seen Tong been pretty on top of defending that inside at turn 3. It can be a passing opportunity, like you say, but if you're defending it correctly, it's super hard to actually make things happen. So Tong is very well aware of that, and he's able to keep his position here in 4th place, breaking the toe as we go over hilltop. Super close here. I couldn't call who's gonna manage to get out on top in this battle before.
Yeah, I'm not going to make any predictions of who's going to finish where, but I know for sure we're going to have a thriller of a finish. Just a handful of minutes left to go here in this race, a handful of laps left to go as well. For Mark Foley, it's looking to be a win finally here in Series 15 of the PCA, despite the fact that he was able to grab his second pole earlier on, yet to grab a victory. So if he can finally break through, that'd be a nice monkey taken off of his shoulders as Ben Leong 1.8 seconds farther back, as that was being a bang-up between Will Wolf and Terrence Tong as they headed their way over the crest across the stripe. Jepson Barnett starting to duke it out as well, as it is ending in tears for these racers. Door to door, wheel to wheel, fender to fender racing. Drivers throwing bare-knuckle fists at one another.
And Jepson loses out as well coming through there. Barnett able to make it through. Barnett up inside the top 6 now. And like I say, Tong and Wolf were super close there. And actually, maybe a little bit of contact from car 16 to the rear of Tong. So interesting to see if there's any reports coming out about that. But super close on the exit. You're watching both cars here. A little bit of contact pushes Tong off, and also for Jefferson having contact in the middle of the circuit as well, so he's losing out a little bit. Still big points all for him compared to most of the rounds this season, but he'll be kicking himself a little bit because he was running 4th before the pit stops. You're watching from Kevin Orr's perspective. Wow, a lot of contact in the middle of the corner there, and Kevin Orr's like, I'll go down the inside. A little bit of contact into Cascades as well, and Barnett able to hang on for the time being.
Yeah, he may be the Hurricane Region driver, but he was slicing through that battle like a machete. That was some awesome stuff heading out turn number 1, peeking his way through the smoke, the dust, and the chaos of those two, trying to put each other on the ground as we nearly see another dive heading off into the turn. That's Jason Barnett and Terrence Tong squabbling for 4th at the moment. Will Wolf has driven off into the sunset, so it looks like he's going to finish P4 in this race. After all, they're coming to the white flag next time by for Mark Foley to complete what has been a brilliant drive for him here in round number 5, but that doesn't mean the battling is over. The battling for P5 is not for sure. Terrence Song and Jason Barnett and Kevin Orr. Barnett runs a little bit wide at 3. Orr gonna seize the opportunity, smell some blood in the water, and sweep around the outside through Island Bend. That's a gutsy spot, a sideways snap, gonna end in tears. Orr's gonna get forced off the track. That's gonna bring Joshua Jepson back into it as well. That's a lap car as well. Actually, no, that isn't. Mario Gonzalez, where's he come from in the 777?
Mario Gonzalez has completely flown under the radar. We didn't even think he was in this top 8 fight. You're watching on board now with Kevin Orr. Tries to give the room on the inside, and yeah, like you see, just a bit of a big slide there for the likes of, I think it was, I forgot the name, I think it was Wolf ahead, and unfortunately, it looks to be maybe a bit of a a bit of a challenge. I don't know. It's hard because, you know, as a driver, you don't want to make that sort of mistake, and it'd be interesting to see what the stewards think to that. But thankfully, all still in the race, still able to be finishing pretty close to the top 8.
You know, this is an odd comparison, but the odd similes are kind of my motif on the air, so I'll give it anyways. Seeing that side-by-side racing all through Island Bend, as side note, Mark Foley has now grabbed the white flag here in round number 5 of this season at Oulton Park. But side-by-side racing through there, for the inside car, it's basically like being in a restaurant and hearing somebody at the table next to you say to the waiter after the waiter says, "Enjoy your meal," and they respond by saying, "You too." That unenviable sense of stress, anxiety, and cringe is basically whatever is felt for that car on the outside. When they start to see that car on the inside have a bit of a wiggle all through the turn, it's always going to end in tears. And unfortunately for Kevin Orr, it did end in tears for him. Barnett, really nothing that you could do there side-by-side racing through that turn. You'd probably have a better time trying to pick up antimatter with chopsticks, to tell you the truth. But Mark Foley driving away. Ben Leung and Grant Mikesh still nose to tail. Leung has been able to pull a margin here in the first half of this final lap, so I think he may give himself enough of a buffer where Grant Mikesh won't be able to go for a lunge, and frankly, Grant Mikesh going for the lunge won't really make that much sense considering he holds onto a very comfortable margin in the points. Strelzoff was able to find his way into P14 a couple of moments ago, but not going to be a good day for him championship points-wise, no matter how you slice it. But it's going to be a good day here in the British countryside for Mark Foley. Was able to grab his second pole position a little bit earlier on here tonight after being the quickest man in practice, the quickest man in qualifying by some margin as well. The Maverick region driver in the 316 car going to round his way onto the start-finish straight away to grab his first win here in Series 15. Mark Foley gets the W here at Oulton Park. Ben Leung and Grant Mikesh will round out your podium. Will Wolf and Terrence Song complete your top 5. Mario Gonzalez and a thriller of a battle with himself, Joshua Jepson and Kevin Orr right towards the very end. Orr is going to get shown the door in that battle. He is classed in 9th with Tom Bryce rounding out your top 10. Here's Greg Strelzoff. Bad day for him in the points. Damage control, though, after starting a little bit farther behind, just towards the tail end of the top 30. He's able to punch his way back up into 14th. Not a great night, but certainly could have been a heck of a lot worse for a P2 driver in the points heading into this race.
Yeah, a really, really interesting race that we saw there between all of the top 8, and I mean top 9 you could say, because we didn't really see much of Mario Gonzalez, but he was able to get a place there right at the end with a little bit of the carnage that was happening. We've seen the final few drivers, Dale Green, who we saw have a bit of pit drama in that race from having the number 1 pit stall come to the line, but it was a really, really interesting race to watch that. I think it was super, super action-packed, and it was close throughout, you know, just 2.3 seconds covering that top 3 for your podium here tonight.
Yeah, so it may seem like the gaps were large, but really they weren't, because that was after an hour of racing action. Incredibly close stuff. Even though Mark Foley was kind of the man to beat all day long, he never really gave up that race lead. A brilliantly composed drive for the driver of the 316 car. He wins it over Ben Leung in P2. Grant Mikesh will round out your podium in 3rd. And then from there, it's Will Wolf and Terrence Song completing your top 5, with Jason Barnett, Joshua Jepson, Mario Gonzalez, Kevin Orr, and Tom Bryce rounding out your top 10 here. Looking behind, we have James Martin classed in 11th. Peter Coomer is in P12. Casey McDonald is classed in 13th. Greg Strelzoff, good recovery drive from the LA region driver. He'll be classed in 14th. Richard Woodruff is in 15th. Jeremy Hall is classed in 16th when everything is said and done, from Brett Holmes in the 06 in P17. David T. Glenn will be in 18th. Robert Neville in 19th place. Dean Chapman will round out your top 20. Then from there, we round out the drivers that were on the lead lap with the likes of Mike Matson in 21st, Scott Bowers in 22nd, Lance Grimm in 23rd, Dale Green in 24th, Logan Madden in 25th, Rex Jarwala in P26th, Mark Rondeau in 27th, Peter Sigourney. The last of the cars to see the checkered flag on the lead lap is classed in 28th. And from there, we have the likes of Chris Sherburne and Steve Komatz completing your top 30. They're both 1 lap down. Then from there, we have multiple laps down in the form of Ken Locklear and Jeremy Main, 2 laps down, David Snelling 5 laps down. And then from here, we have the retirements that include Mark Lacombe, Chad Casion, Charlie Fair, Jonathan Quo, and Lyle Eddy in 38th. A special shout out as well to Mark Foley, able to grab the fastest lap of the race throughout it here as well. So I was actually able to jump up into P2 in the championship there. Fantastic to raise that, William. Thank you for that information. It truly underscores a great night for him here.
Yeah, super controlling night. You know, able to get that pole by such a massive margin in consideration to how close the race was. And we never really saw him, apart from a very, very short period of time, break that gap under a second. Controlled the race, took that slightly longer pit stop, but was very measured, safe on fuel, and just kind of controlled his race, affected what he could affect. And yeah, a great race for him, and a good win.
Yeah, so fantastic drive from Mark Foley, and we'll get the opportunity to chat with him right about now. Mark Foley now joining us here in the broadcast booth. Mark, welcome in. Congratulations on the victory. It's your first win here this season after starting from the pole. How was it out there?
It wasn't too bad. Not a lot of traffic to deal with, and pretty clean air. I had some instruction from Blake with full speed, and he gave me some advice on the dirty air behind cars, but I really didn't have to deal with that. So just limit the mistakes and stay consistent and drive 60 minutes.
Yeah, and despite the fact that it looked like a calm, cool, and collected race from you, it was feeling some pressure throughout. You never drove entirely away from the field, always had some pressure from behind. How was it trying to just stay with it throughout the entirety of this race?
Yeah, it may be a little difficult to maintain concentration without looking in the rearview mirror a whole bunch, but then just reel myself back in and just drive the track and hit the marks and stay consistent without a lot of looking in the rearview mirror.
Hey, looking through that windshield worked out fantastically for you here at Oulton Park. Quickest in practice, quickest in qualifying, and quickest in the race. Must be feeling good with that ahead of steam and momentum heading off into the 6th round of the championship at Suzuka in 2 weeks' time. What are your thoughts heading there?
Well, I take a little bit of confidence. I've worked on some things this week, again, with Blake, and I hope to take those to Suzuka. And a big shout out to him, also Sim Shop, Eagles Canyon Raceway. Everybody's been a lot of help, and the PCA organization is just absolutely great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you as well for joining us here, Mark. And some good news as well, pointed out by my colleague William here in the broadcast booth. We believe you're now in 2nd in the championship points, so really good night for you here. Thank you for joining us in the booth, and congratulations on the win.
Thank you very much. Good night.
And that right there was Mark Foley, race winner here at the end of the night. And William, I'll pass the mic off to you to have a chat with our P2 finisher and still very strong performer throughout this race, that being Ben Leung.
Yeah, hi Ben. Great race from you tonight, getting 2nd place. Foley looked to have had the race under control from pretty much start to finish, but you got pretty close at times thinking about the exit of the pit stops, but also sort of around the half an hour mark. Did you ever feel like you had a chance to maybe make a move on Foley if you were able to keep the car clean?
Foley drove a clean race. Like, he didn't make any mistakes at all. So, I mean, I was just trying to keep a distance, and hopefully something happens during the pit stop. But I think when he came out of the pit, that was my only chance I got really close to him. And I think I made a couple of mistakes and just couldn't make that work.
Yeah, it was a good race from you. It's your best result of this season. You've outscored a lot of the drivers around you in the championship, so I would be expecting to see you move up inside the top 5 as the championship standings. We've got 3 events left for this championship season. How do you think about a track like Suzuka? It's a really, really long circuit. Does that maybe change your approach to how you approach practice for that?
Suzuka is a lot of fun. I think we ran that a couple of seasons ago, and it is a challenging track, but it has a really nice flow. But I think the challenge next week will be the weather. I think we're going to have some mixed weather happening.
Well, I wish you the best of luck for that round. Great racing today, and congratulations on P2 and your best result of the season so far. Wish you good luck at Suzuka.
Thank you.
And that was Ben Leung, our P2 finisher at the end of this race, joining us here in the broadcast booth. And let's have a chat with our final podium finisher and championship points leader entering this race and leaving this race. Grant Mikesh joining us here in the booth. Grant, welcome in. P3 for you at the end of this race. Looked like a fun one at there here at Oulton Park. How was it for you?
It was an adventure. I didn't get a lot of practice in. I had to go visit relative. My grandma just died or passed about 3 hours ago, so just got back home and a chance to get a little bit of practice in, and it worked out. It was some really good racing with Ben and kept it nice and clean, thankfully.
Well, I first off want to say I am sorry for your loss, but it looked like a very challenging track to try and manage here tonight. This track certainly packs a punch, just a tick under 3 miles and 17 turns, and it's really no point to really just take a breath racing around here.
No, the undulations make it a huge challenge, so you've got to be really careful with your downshifts, good with your braking, or it will spit you out. And I think a few people fell victim to that. I nearly did a few times, and thankfully it stayed under, but that was a lot of fun, a lot of work.
And of course, Suzuka next time out for round number 6, of this season. It's going to be another venture off into a very different racetrack than the one that preceded it. What are your thoughts heading there?
When I played Gran Turismo, I really struggled with the opening S's, but they were a lot of fun when you got them right. So let's see what the weather brings, and it's going to be a good equalizer between everybody. And I do want to say thank you to Chris. He helped keep me calm, helped keep me measured through this. So thanks, Chris Cook. Really appreciated all your help.
And I will say one thing as well before we let you go, Grant. It's one thing to compliment you about the fantastic performances that you've put on throughout this season, but P3 in this race, considering everything that's happened to you, that is a very impressive drive to take from a otherwise very unfortunate point in time. I will once again send my condolences out to you and your family, and I'll let you go and celebrate the P3.
Thank you. She is an absolutely wonderful woman, and she lived a very full life, so love you, Grandma.
Well, that's the best solace you can take from it, Grant. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you at Suzuka. And that right there was Grant Mikesh, our P3 finisher here at the end of this race. That is... It's to hear that he had gone through that a little bit earlier on and still got a P3 out of this result. Talk about being headstrong. That's a fantastic performance from him here. But William, a darn good race here at Oulton Park. I wasn't really sure what we were expecting heading off into this, considering this track is so tight and twisty and technical in cars that, let's face it, are not the smallest in the world. But that was honestly very entertaining, and the racers gave us no shortage of action to talk about throughout.
Yeah, it was an entertaining race throughout the duration of the broadcast. It was certainly interesting to see how it ebbed and flowed, and like Grant was saying, it was very, very difficult to not make a mistake, and I think we saw that a lot throughout the night's proceedings. So it'll be interesting to see how Suzuka turns out for these drivers next time out, and certainly a very, very entertaining one as, like you say, we head into the last 3 rounds of this season.
Yeah, but of course, between then and now here, when the series rocks up to Suzuka for the PCA Club Class, we've got some more PCA action for you in just 1 week's time here on the channel. The Sports and the Challenge Class going to be tackling this racetrack on Wednesday the 11th and Thursday the 12th, so make sure you tune in here to never miss out on any of the racing action. March 19th, or the next time you see the PCA Club Class, and we hope to see you all there at Suzuka Circuit. That will be an absolute awesome racetrack to keep this season up and rolling. Oulton Park provided some challenges for sure, but it was one man that was able to tackle the challenge the best. Mark Foley, the man of the night here in the PCA Club Class. He gets his first win of the season. But for myself, Ron Mons, William Chadwick joining me here in the broadcast booth, and Hugo Luis working on the cameras and the graphics in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you also very much for tuning into the action here on RaceSpotTV tonight, and we hope to see you all wherever it is in the not-too-distant future.